During the 8 years Pnin had taught at Wayndell College, he had changed his lodgings, for one reason or another, mainly sonic, about every semester. The accumulation of consecutive rooms in his memory now resembled those displays of grouped elbow chairs on show, and beds and lamps and inglenooks which, ignoring all space-time distinctions, commingle in the soft light of a furniture store beyond which it snows, and the dusk deepens, and nobody really loves anybody. Hey, this is Nick.
And this is Nathan.
And this is David. Today we're discussing Vladimir Nabokov's 1957 novel Pnin, which sort of follows a few vignettes in the middle life of an avuncular, somewhat sad professor of Russian linguistics.
Sure. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm not. Is it clear exactly what he teaches?
I mean, he's in the French department, so
he
who
only
knows what he's
has
doing.
4 students.
Yeah, I think
Right.
that's true. Yeah.
It's because of McCarthyism, though. It's not his fault. They
Yeah.
address it in the book.
Yeah.
Let's
Yeah.
go with linguistics. Let's do that.
Yeah, let's go with linguistics. I mean, linguistics certainly plays a huge part of this novel. There's a lot of very specific jargon related to grammar and ways of pronouncing words, which, it was okay, I guess.
Yeah, I feel like there's like 3 really big jokes going at the same time. Like one is that linguistic stuff, and it's not just in his quotes. It's also how the narrator's writing as well. Sometimes it like bleeds in. Then there's the whole layer of just like the academic, like faculty-oriented jokes that are fucking great. And then there's just this weird sort of bureaucratic, I don't know, just nothingness. It's very boring in spots, very banal. And like, I think these are all just running in parallel. And I can't quite figure out whether the combination of them is as good as I want it to be.
Yeah. I mean,
That's
it wouldn't
my
be a
dilemma.
Nabokov novel without a lot of linguistic jokes in play. And maybe that's where we can start. I think Nick kind of nailed it, where I think all 3 of us have this sense that the book was not quite what we wanted it to be.
Yeah. Each section was so distinctly its own vignette that I had a hard time keeping any sense of pacing through the book. I kind of had to feel like I kept having to start over.
Yeah.
And for that reason, I had a hard time holding interest. And then when, I think that there is layering and characters do come and go, but there's also 300 characters. So trying to keep track of like, okay, well, where did I read about this character, and does this character matter? And I just kind of got lost and had a hard time sinking my teeth into it.
Yeah. There's an odd sense, which I think that comes up a lot in Russian literature, but here more than anywhere else, it almost felt gossipy. Like this guy was related to this person who married this woman whose ex-husband went to this war. It's like, why am I following this?
Yeah. And I think like, I don't know, the more I read Nabokov, and, we did the book last time, and I've been slowly pacing myself through some of his short stories, I realize there's just this huge underlying thing of what it means to be basically in exile, which is exactly what this is about. But there's another thing, which is like the exile community, and it is really gossipy in a way. He has a lot of quotes about how they're all interconnected, and they all get pushed from, when they're pushed out of Russia, they're pushed into different spots in Europe, from Berlin into Paris, and they all sort of operate in this sort of salon-like community. And he describes it in a lot of different ways. But yeah, it feels like this very small, kind of insular, almost running inside joke. And in a weird way, I often ask myself, is Pnin escaping Russia? Has he been pushed out of Russia? Has he been pushed out of Europe? Has he been pushed out of America? Has he been pushed out of this small group? Is he in exile anyway? And I think that's some of like the underlying stuff going on there. It might be a personal thing, even more so than, I don't know, the geographical and political exiles.
I mean, I think that that's kind of the value that I would like to pull out of the book, is that, Pnin he's kind of a slapsticky character through the book and does all these humorous things. And I imagine maybe in the 1950s when this came out, there's a lot of interest in Russia and Russian culture and the Russian language, in the height of the Cold War. And so all these jokes having to do with Russia and his funny speech and all this maybe resonated more at that time. But underneath that, there's this river of sadness in his life. And I think that's kind of, maybe that's the point, is to, hey, it seems all funny and fun, but like there's some serious shit that went down. And I want to appreciate that. But I kind of like when those moments came, I wasn't quite in the right place on the ride, I feel like.
When the moments of extreme seriousness and sadness, or the moments of avuncular satire?
Well, both. I just never felt like I was in pace with the book.
Yeah.
You know,
the structure. I mean, going back to that, I feel like it wasn't so spaced out as like this big collection of vignettes that are spanning a big spectrum, and you can kind of piece them together as you will. But it wasn't as tied together as something resembling a novel. It was sort of this in-between space. I totally feel exactly what you're talking about, having to restart each time. I was trying to figure out as I was reading this, if I was distracted, if I couldn't like tie these things together. But so I don't know if that was intended, or if it was, multiple of these chapters were published in the New Yorker. So I don't know if this was kind of like a backfit thing, but that doesn't really seem like something I would attribute to Nabokov. Like everything he does is very well mapped out.
Yeah.
So I don't know if this is meant to be sort of that in between, like living document of what it means to be banal.
It doesn't fit the nature of the novel if that is meant to be. I had the same feeling you guys did. It's very episodic in a way, if you were watching a television series, but you kept missing episodes.
Yeah.
Almost. Like there's these leaps. You're like, okay, so now we're here. And there's a little bit of catch up, a little bit of background that comes, maybe a few paragraphs in, a few pages in, that kind of catch you up on some of the characters you're familiar with, but you never grow with any of the characters long enough to feel connected to. Like there's a point where you feel like you're going to connect with Victor, his
I was looking forward to
water
that.
son,
Right.
And he was awesome. I was like, oh right, cool, this is going to be great. And then he just shows up, goes to sleep, and then boom, you don't hear from him again. It's like,
right,
what?
Yeah. The whole section where Victor's like getting all of his like psychotherapy from his parents, and he's like not checking out as being like problematic or having any issues whatsoever, and that becomes the bigger problem.
That was great.
That was
just
like,
that checks out in the year 2019.
Yeah.
But I related to that, and I think, Nick, when you said it feels like an inside joke. It's kind of how I felt about it. Like maybe if I brought my own baggage about some assumptions about Russians, or some assumption about education and the education system and all the gossip and how that works, if I brought a bunch of those assumptions, maybe I would fill in those gaps, but I just felt totally out of touch with it.
Can I read one of those assumptions about academic things and satires? It's the beginning
Please.
of chapter 6. This is one of my favorite passages.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
So I'll read the first couple sentences. So, the 1954 fall term had begun. Again, the marble neck of a homely Venus in the vestibule of Humanities Hall received the vermilion imprint, an applied lipstick of a mimicked kiss. Again, the Waynedale recorder discussed the parking problem, capitalized, note that. Again, in the margins of library books, earnest freshmen inscribed such helpful glosses as description of nature or irony. And in a pretty edition of Mallarmé's poems, an especially ableist scholiast had already underlined in violet ink the difficult word assoy and scrawled above it birds. I'd like to note that I actually don't know how to pronounce that difficult word. Maybe we'll just leave that.
Idea.
Thus, the joke is actually valid.
Yeah, maybe it's not even a word. Maybe you just made that up.
Okay, yeah.
That could be.
I wouldn't put it past him.
Later on, that paragraph continues, and I think you kind of get Nabokov making jokes, or like his own sort of criticism. It says, and still the college creaked on. Hardworking graduates with pregnant wives still wrote dissertations on Dostoevsky and Simone de Beauvoir. Literary departments still labored under the impression that Stendhal, Galsworthy, Dreiser, and Mann were great writers. Word plastics like conflict and pattern were still in vogue. As usual, sterile instructors successfully endeavored to produce, quote-unquote, by reviewing the books of more fertile colleagues, and as usual, a crop of lucky faculty members were enjoying or about to enjoy various awards received earlier in the year.
It's pretty acidic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's laying it out a bit thick there.
I want to point out that my book which was a used book, does have things underlined exactly the way you
So-
described. Wait. And one paragraph is circled, or there's like a parenthetical next to it, and the note is funny.
It's like a Seinfeld episode. It's funny. No, my book. This is my favorite part about that quote. Is my book has a lot of underlining in it because it's also used. Seems like it was written in by a college student. But there's one specific spot where somebody's underlining things and then writes bad English. It's literally critiquing Nabokov's English. And I was like, oh, you didn't fucking read far enough in this book. You're the problem. He's making fun of you before you even get to that section. Anyway, so acidic academic satire check, full of that.
I think where Nathan, as we've sort of established, Nathan's home is in poignancy, in that sort of that pathos of feeling sad about certain aspects of life, and that's where you felt you wanted to connect more, perhaps, Nathan? I don't know.
Well, that's where I felt like I feel like that's the heart of the novel. And I feel like that's the point. I just didn't. It's like when you hear a joke and you're like, oh, that's funny, like this underline. That's funny. That is humor. But then you're not laughing. And that's how I felt about, like, it's like, oh, I see how that is poignant, but I don't feel it because I feel like I was, I wasn't in the rhythm of the book. Yeah, I mean,
so kept breaking it up too much.
Yeah, I don't know. There's certainly moments, and there's certainly, he has this relationship with, or these memories of this early love
Of Mira.
Who honestly I kept confusing her and Liza because there's a bunch of flashbacks to different periods of his life, and I was Mira, Liza, kind of similar, but that's a very poignant period of the book, and it's this love affair that he has, and then loses touch with her, and she ends up dying in a concentration camp in Europe, and that's kind of the backdrop to all this humor, is this very serious heartbreak. But yeah, I just it's there. It's like maybe it's there, and maybe if I read it again or read it 2 more times and got past the stuff that doesn't matter, like all the other characters that come and go, maybe it would hit me. But
I mean, that's
life, isn't it?
Right. Yeah, and actually, I want to read the quote that you're talking about, Nathan, because this to me is like the entire like emotional content of the novel and Pnin himself. I'll kind of jump in the middle of a sentence. It goes, "If one were quite sincere with oneself, no conscience, and hence no consciousness, could be expected to subsist in a world where such things as Mira's death were possible. One had to forget, because one could not live with the thought that this graceful, fragile, tender young woman, with those eyes, that smile, those gardens and snows in the background, had been brought in a cattle car to an extermination camp and killed by an injection of phenol into the heart, into the gentle heart one had heard beating under one's lips in the dusk of the past." Which is a lot. Yeah. And that's not that far away from these super funny, clever satires of academic culture. And I think that honestly is what I'm trying to work through in my head of what this book is you have this very sort of sad, almost moral hero in a way in Pnin. We can get into some of that as well. And he's really kind of a victim for everybody. I mean, everybody makes fun of him. There's huge sections of whether he's exiled in one way or 17 different ways. But he's also carrying a lot of heartbreak, and he has to work through it in different ways. And as that quote showed, he works through it by forgetting, essentially. And so you have this sort of uneven kind of weird collection of vignettes that don't necessarily fit together. But as David just said, such is life, right? It's almost too accurate in a way.
Yeah, but isn't it? I don't want to fault Nabokov, but isn't it the job of the author to like weave that together in a way that resonates? Because we go through life like this and can't piece together and hold those moments.
I mean, we know from last episode and the reading of Speak Memory is he's super obsessed with the concept of memory and what that means. And he talks openly about a lot of stuff coming from his own life. And you kind of see that in this book as well, right? I mean, obviously he taught in America, was exiled, all that stuff, right? But I think it's more of a like what's the emotional content of your memory that he's kind of exploring here. And it's easy to overlook because some of the stuff is so funny, and because the structure feels it really feels awkward. I can't get around how not flowing it was as a reader. But yeah, that's just literally just the question I have. Like, are the people who are really into this book, because there are a lot of people who are really into this book, does that click with them in some way? Is this really like trying to paste together like how an actual human mind deals with its own emotions when you're under basically indefinite stress and indefinite isolation, loneliness, all that good stuff? Maybe.
I mean, is it written in a way to critique and to understand it, to like that you have to sit and pull those pieces out yourself and then write a think piece on it about how profound it is? Because to just read it, those pieces, the poignancy kind of mixes in with the banality.
Or was it just a bunch of chapters from the New Yorker that got put into a book that almost won a National Book Award? I don't know how this works. I'm not an artist.
Yeah.
But
I mean, we could talk about some more elements of the book. Like, what about the narrator?
Yes.
Oh,
like
that.
What?
Yeah.
So this is another thing that I'm not sold on.
How obvious was it to you who the narrator was? Like when you got to the last chapter?
I mean, not at all. I mean, there's mention the first time you see, where is it? Maybe 15 pages into the book, he says, "Oh, and with my help." And I was like, wait, whose help? What the fuck is he, And then only briefly do we get little hints that he's like Pnin's doctor.
Well, that's what I thought. He was Pnin's doctor, but
right.
I evidently misread that.
I think he was just saying that he was in the position to comment on his health. But yeah, I started off thinking it was his doctor the entire time.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, this is going to be interesting when we find out that Pnin has to go to the doctor, and that for some reason this doctor gets obsessed with his life, and then it's going to kind of come together.
Yeah,
but this guy actually evidently
works
grew
for
up
the
with
department.
Pnin, ends up working for the same department and replacing him. Right? He was the guy who came in to teach Russian and whatever the other department.
Right.
Exactly. And this is the guy that Pnin said, "I won't work under this man."
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it starts to weave through all the ways that this guy has been in his life the entire time. And he's kind of always been like in the background almost.
But wait, so did this guy work at the college already, or was he coming in from a different college?
I think he was brought in elsewhere, but one of the references that kind of cleared it up for me is
because Pnin said he hadn't spoken to him in a decade or something like that.
Right. So the narrator, who's Vladimir Vladimirovich,
yeah,
right. He references talking at the. Remember, there was kind of like that estate where like the Russian emigre like population would go hang out at. He references being there with Pnin. Okay. And then I went back and read that section, and there's a section where Pnin is complaining about Vladimir as
a liar,
kind of being a liar, or I mean, there's the whole thing where he's also what's the word for like the butterfly type of person who's like super into it. I'll find it. I'll reference it back. But he references it like using it as like a cover for like character and stuff. So it actually sets up this tension between the two way before I had any idea who the narrator might be.
Totally missed that.
This. Yeah, it falls into the, hey, there's 300 character Russian.
He says his entomology is a pose.
Right, there it is. Yeah, so there's this tension that's already in there, but like unless you were to like follow that loop back and remember the name of the people in the estate and stuff, honestly, the second time I read it was the only time that made that connection. First time I was like, well, here's just more words, more names I forgot. Which one's this?
Yeah.
They all kind of sound the same, which I guess is potentially my fault as a reader. But yeah, so like I really think that, again, as we normally talk about these things, I tend to like them more. But I think there's some stuff woven in here that like another round or two through, I have a hunch that this shit becomes pretty cool. And like,
but the frame itself of this narrator knowing these details is so unbelievable in a novel that's supposed to be very realistic in some ways that it feels like itself is a joke. And I don't know what the joke is trying to make me laugh at.
Yeah. I mean, some of those things that it knows, it's not like details of his life. It's like his hallucinations of his memory. Like Pnin's hallucinations. That's like the book starts pretty much with a very vivid hallucination. So let's presume that it's not just sloppy writing, and that there's a reason that this narrator, who's distant from Pnin and Pnin claims is a liar, knows or writes about these very specific things. And is that potentially, and I don't want to like over intellectualize this because we already are, and you can talk anything into being great, and maybe that's why people like this book. But so is it some sort of commentary on, like, maybe they're the same person?
I was thinking
at a certain point you lose part of yourself. You lose that emigre status, and you become this other person who you didn't want to be.
I mean, there is kind of like a hero anti-hero thing going on here. Like the narrator is in some ways like an evil Nabokov, right? It's like super into butterflies. He's like basically I don't know, an elitist when it comes to literature. Basically drives Pnin's wife to suicide attempts by criticizing her poetry.
Yeah, but I mean, that was fair criticism.
But her poetry was bad.
Yeah, her poetry was bad.
Okay, so noted. You're currently identifying with the evil anti-hero. Got it. But what I was gonna say. So yeah, there's that, like, okay, are these two sides of the same coin thing? But maybe the whole structure of it, like, how does a narrator who isn't Pnin have access to these moments? And it's so disjointed. Maybe that's actually why, because those were the only moments that he could view or was part of or was in the background in Pnin's life.
But
maybe that's how it.
He wasn't.
But he wasn't.
Was he?
I mean, so think about like when they're on like the
He knew
Russian
the same
estate,
people.
right? But like it goes back to kind of the gossip thing. So I'm not saying that like he was there 100%. What I mean by like in the background is like that's the things that he had connections to with the conversations and hearsay and stuff in those. But obviously he didn't track that the entire time, but with enough of like an insular community and enough of that stuff being passed around, you can piece it together that way. But that's all that he had access to. I don't know. The structure is like my number one thing that I can't get over with this book. So I'm like looking for what it is.
Or just take it to the meta level a little bit, and that the evil narrator / character is Nabokov. He is writing about Pnin because Pnin is an invention. He laughs at him because he wants us to laugh at him.
And he knows these things about Pnin because Pnin doesn't actually exist, so he can know whatever he wants to know about him. And he just writes himself into the novel and makes himself antagonistic to his protagonist because he's also including these things in Pnin's life that Pnin doesn't want.
Yeah.
And then it's very, what's that?
Which is
Will Ferrell?
Which
you guys?
Are you going to tie this to a Will Ferrell movie
Elf.
right now? All right.
No.
You say Elf.
Yeah.
Because
so
of
it's
the
like
holidays. I got
Elf.
it.
Yeah. Stranger Than Fiction.
Stranger Than Fiction.
There it is. Okay. That makes a little bit more sense than Elf.
But not
I
much.
honestly, so this morning I just read a short story. Normally I'm the one that lowbrows this, so thank you both. No, so I just read a short story by Nabokov called, I believe it's Recruiting, and he talks about this exact concept. So like the narrator is looking for basically a character to use. And he's kind of looking at an old man coming from a funeral, and he talks about being on a bus and seeing another one and wondering when he's going to kind of latch on to that one and like how much he can basically distort them. It's not really even an evil way. It's just you see like the actual sort of like puppet masterness of it, that he's looking for the thing to start with such that then he can pull the chords and the strings to make it sort of massage into what he wants. And I think from like a general like literary development thing of like Nabokov, like that definitely shows up more and more of him playing with that role of what the narrator is and who the writer is and where these angles come from and all of that. So I'm going to latch on to David's explanation and say that, yeah, maybe that's how this works. Is it's playing with that window of the view of it all and
Don't talk me into liking this book.
I would just have to convince you that it's some degree of meta and like that'll check out.
Yeah.
It only goes so far, because then we're still left with, why are we giving only these little episodes into his life? Which, again, they're not spaced out far enough to where it's like interesting, where you're like, oh, okay, here's him a few years later, here's him, it's all pretty condensed into his time at, what's it called? Waynesdale? Wayndale College. So and you get flashbacks of things, but the main chapters are structured around his time at that university.
Yeah, the one thing that kind of made me rethink how this works of like, okay, so Pnin feels like essentially the victim of it all, right? Everybody's, for better or lack of a better term, shitting on him the entire time. And it all becomes really, really sort of magnified when the narrator shows up at the college, and it's basically the end of the book, and he's staying with the Cockerells, and they spend the entire night just making fun of him, like basically rehashing everything that happened, from his mispronunciations, from him being a weirdo, like all this great stuff. And then it also like goes even further to where they call him. They basically prank call Pnin, right? And you just feel
I didn't read it as
bad.
that negative.
Well, there's this line, and this is what I wanted to tie into of like who's actually the victim here. But it goes on to say, finally, the whole thing grew to be such a bore that I fell wondering if by some poetical vengeance this Pnin business had not become with Cockerell the kind of fatal obsession which substitutes its own victim for that of the initial ridicule. To kind of flipping, is it actually, our sad hero that's the victim of it all? Or is it somehow these people who are obsessed with this thing who maybe have nothing else going on? He's actually filling a void in their lives. And so maybe he's not overly concerned with it. I mean, we get some of the emotional baggage and things that he carries as a character, but maybe he's actually in a pretty good spot himself, and it's these other sort of fickle, just petty people who are the ones that are victims of their own poor behaviors.
Well, to David's point, was it how mean-natured was it? I mean, because he's a
mean
character. I mean, the prank call, maybe
that's pretty
goes
mean,
a bit
right?
Far,
But it wasn't. They wanted to actually see if he was still there. They even wanted to go drive over and talk to him. And they kind of refer to him as like, oh, our Pnin. Like, he's kind of like this lovable goof in a way. But I think I don't know. I mean, it's a bit
they all came
mean-spirited.
to his party.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought they all kind of liked him.
Weren't they kind of making fun of him the whole time at his house heating party?
A little bit.
Like, he's like a novelty to them, right? And like, I don't know. I mean, honestly, like, think of any time you've treated something or someone as a novelty. Do you really respect it? I think I know what
respecting
my own
and
answer
liking
is.
aren't always connected.
Yeah,
but,
I mean, I don't think that they respected him, but
no.
So they're dicks.
Is he worthy of respect?
Yeah, he is worthy of respect. I want to read the. Give me a second to find this, but the letter that he writes to his eventual wife and even later eventual ex-wife. Here we go.
But he's a romantic.
No, but this is great, dude. This is some like unselfish. Okay,
no, the writing is amazing, but she is
got her own
clearly
stuff.
not a good person.
That's not the point, right? So let me read this. He goes,
Okay.
I am not handsome. I am not interesting. I am not talented. I am not even rich. But is it Liza or Lies? He uses Lise.
I think that's Lies. I think she went by Lies in
Lies.
France.
So it's Liza or
Which
Lies?
again, lies. That tells you something right there.
Oh, I'll stick with Lies. Okay, I'll go. I am not handsome. I am not interesting. I am not talented. I am not even rich. But, Lies, I offer you everything I have to the last blood corpuscle? Corpuscule? God damn.
Yeah.
Dude, this guy's vocabulary
It's
just
dangerous to
get
try to
killed.
read Nabokov.
I thought it was-
out loud.
I thought it was-
It's
it
a
is.
minefield. You're
Picking
like,
a simple one.
Oh shit.
Okay, I'm
a
going to
risk.
start again.
Desuetude?
Let me see where I'm going to cut off all
That's a duty.
banal. Okay, number 3.
Hey, David taught me how to pronounce that word. Actually,
Were you pronouncing
Flashback.
banal the whole time?
I said banal. He said, "Oh, what?"
We'll all get cultured at some point. Okay, here we go. I am not handsome. I am not interesting. I am not talented. I am not even rich. But, Lies, I offer you everything I have. To the last blood corpuscule, to the last tear, everything. And believe me, this is more than any genius can offer you, because a genius needs to keep so much in store, and thus cannot offer you the whole of himself as I do. I may not achieve happiness, but I know I shall do everything to make you happy. I want you to write poems, editor's note, they're very bad poems. I want you to go on with your psychotherapeutic research, in which I do not understand much, while questioning the validity of what I can understand. And then he goes off on a little tangent that's very Pninian. But it's pretty dope. That's some love stuff. Doesn't matter if your poetry's bad. I'll still love you anyway.
But then she abuses him for the rest of his life.
Yeah, I mean, it sets up sort of a bit of an off-center dependent relationship. But that doesn't mean he's not genuine and like a very good person.
But again,
where I'm going with this.
Oh, yeah. But is he worthy of respect? I don't know. I mean, he's likable, and I think there's a certain sadness to him that you feel empathy towards. But in a way, I don't know. I kind of understand why people sort of not laugh at him a little bit, but he's humorous. He's like a bit goofy. He likes to play with the washing machine when nobody's around.
And that's why I respect him. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's a good question of like, to what degree is he a novelty or anybody's friend or anybody that someone respects? Like, it does sort of seem to float in the middle space, but I don't know. I read that last section, especially when they go through all of the things about him, as like, they're just laughing. They even like has the comment, like perfect, like Nabokov is like, our labial muscles were like cringing by the end from smiling too much.
He's not really a worthy hero, because it's not like he's not exactly treated unfairly. He got a sweet deal that he didn't earn. He taught
and didn't put any effort into.
He didn't put any effort into it. They didn't learn anything. And he was making enough to buy this nice house, and then he loses it because he was only there because the guy who was the chair of the department.
Yeah, but I mean, like the post-war housing market is like totally different. So it's like
and
part-time faculty,
people that worked at universities could make money.
But still, I mean, he was kind of a parasite on the system anyway. So when he gets fired, it's like, yeah, I feel bad for him. But
he was super genuine. Like when he would like get off on like his like tangents about like these like Russian cultural things in the middle of his linguistic class, which obviously had nothing to do with the class that he was supposed to teach. But he was super into it because the one thing that like he missed the most is the fact that, much like Nabokov himself, that like he could not go back. His childhood was taken from him. It was sort of, it's gone. It's basically the equivalent of a snow globe that doesn't exist to anyone.
Yeah, I mean, which is why I think Avuncular captures his character. He's amiable. He's somewhat pleasant, if a bit odd, and particular about his preferences.
Aren't we all?
Yeah, and I think there's a certain way in which we all relate to him. I did in some ways, when you are feeling down by your particular... I can't think of the word. Fuck.
Just say avuncular again.
Avuncular.
Your particular avuncularity.
Avuncularities. Particularities. Yeah. I don't know.
I hope we find out later today that like the dictionary.com word of the day is avuncular, and you just like splice this.
That would be fantastic. No, I still use the calendars where you peel off a word.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And then you try to use it 30 times in a day.
That's right. That's the only way you're going to remember it.
Yeah.
Yesterday was banal. Today's
Totally unrelated, but I want to read my favorite passage from the book, which doesn't really relate to anything, but
perfect.
Sure.
That's a perfect structure for us doing a podcast about this book.
Yeah. So this happens at the beginning of the book when he basically has a seizure of some kind in a park, and he's staring at the trees, staring at the leaves, and then has this hallucinatory memory. It goes on for a while, but as he's coming to, the last thing he hallucinates is, I guess, the last time he had one of these seizures as a boy, and he's staring at the wallpaper in that case. So it goes, "It stood to reason that if the evil designer, the destroyer of minds, the friend of fever, had concealed the key to the pattern with such monstrous care, that key must be as precious as life itself, and, when found, would regain for Timofey Pnin his everyday health, his everyday world. And this lucid, alas too lucid thought, forced him to persevere in the struggle."
It's a good cut.
And I was like, ooh, I want more of this.
Not what the rest of the book is about.
No. Yeah, there are moments like that, and there was a quote. just before that, or just after, where it was sort of describing that sort of sensation of him having that sort of nervous breakdown or seizure. I can't find it for the life of me. Oh, here, I found it. I do not know if it has ever been noted before that one of the main characteristics of life is discreteness. Unless a film of flesh envelops us, we die. Man exists only insofar as he is separated from his surroundings. The cranium is a space traveler's helmet. Stay inside or you perish. Death is divestment. Death is communion. It may be wonderful to mix with the landscape, but to do so is the end of the tender ego. The sensation poor Pnin experienced was something very like that divestment, that communion. He felt porous and pregnable. He was sweating. He was terrified.
A little bit of a throwback to Invitation to a Beheading.
Yeah.
Anybody? Yeah. I like that there's this kind of like undercurrent of heavy philosophical thought. And that's what I have enjoyed about previous Nabokov books. I feel like in this one it was buried a bit deep, except in a few
undercurrent.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's funny. As you guys were like reading those passages, I was like, those are great. But I remember the passage that I like almost the most, which is when like he says the line, they're talking about the cartoons in the magazine, and he's just like, I do not understand what is advertisement and what is not advertisement. Go on. He goes, you just relax, Timothy, and I'll do the explaining. Oh, look, I like this one. Oh, this is very clever. We have here a combination of two ideas, the desert island and the girl in the puff. Now look, Timothy, please. He reluctantly put on his reading glasses. This is a desert island with a lone palm, and this is a bit of broken raft, and this is a shipwrecked mariner, and this is a ship's cat he saved, and this here, on that rock. Impossible, said Pnin. So small island, moreover with palm, cannot exist in such big sea. Well, it exists here. Impossible isolation. Yes, but really, you're not playing fair, Timothy. You know perfectly well you agree with Lore that the world of the mind is based on a compromise with logic. I have reservations. First of all, logic herself. And they keep running on this as he's dissecting like a small cartoon is like not being logical.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's a very emotional moment because in that moment, he can't fucking identify with anything. I don't know what is advertisement and what is not advertisement. And think of that. If you open up a magazine and like, which page of these are real?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting reading these three passages we just read in isolation from the rest of the book and thinking about Invitation to a Beheading and the sort of sense of isolation in that case, and this sort of like existential isolation and this desire to have a wider communion and being surrounded by absurdity.
Yeah. Right. One happened in an entire world of exile and one happened in an entire prison cell of exile.
Yeah.
It was kind of the same actual arc in a way.
Yeah, kind of. Except, I mean, the other one, he does free himself when his head gets lopped off. And in this one,
I mean, he leaves in his moving truck.
I didn't get the sense that he left towards greater communion, though.
Well, he prefers that sort of loneliness, that sorrowness, to be by himself. So we're going to keep this quote train going. I like his joke about psychiatry being a microcosmos of communism. And he says, yes. Why not leave their private sorrows to people? Is sorrow not, one asks, the only thing in the world people really possess?
Yes. I've taken a photo of that line already. So I'm going to offer a counterpoint as we started off being like, we don't care about this. We just read like, I don't know, what was that, 4 or 5 quotes in a row? They were all pretty great.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Do we like this book?
No.
Is this the thing? Are you sure?
I refuse.
Those quotes are great.
As a whole, no, but damn, do I really love Nabokov's writing. Jesus.
Yeah, dude can write a sentence.
So good.
I mean, I really loved Invitation to a Beheading. And maybe I just need to sit with this for a little bit. Maybe I need to reread it again.
But there are so many moments that aren't worth reading.
Yeah. I mean, in theory, I like the idea of this sort of Three Stooges kind of slapsticky thing with moments of philosophy and poignancy. But I don't know. I didn't like it.
So I want to read, because I have an old school mass market paperback and a sort of a subcategory of things that's always funny to me is how do you take these, we'll call them works of art, heavy lit in some way, and put it into a mass market paperback form, which was destined for basically popular culture. So the way this is summarized on the back, to try to attempt it to be, I don't know, like a John Grisham novel in the 50s, it goes, Timothy Pnin, professor of Russian in an American college who takes the wrong train to deliver a lecture in a language he cannot master. The tireless lover who writes to his treacherous Liza, a genius needs to keep so much in store, and thus cannot offer you the whole of himself as I do. The focal point of academic conspiracies he can't begin to comprehend, who stages a faculty party to end all faculty parties forever.
I read this synopsis somewhere.
What is that? What does that
I
mean?
don't. I was like,
Is that the same book?
Was that the book that I read? What is it? The faculty party to end all faculty
I
parties?
know, right?
What? I read that. I think I read that before I read the book, and I was like, some shit's gonna go down at this
Yeah,
faculty
I know.
party.
Like a conspiracy that you're getting fired or shot, as he noted.
Yeah. I'm so glad I did not read that because that
Yeah, no,
is so far off the target.
That's so cool though. But I love like somebody like sat down. They're like, all right, this is what we're gonna use to move these units.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess fucking make it into a conspiracy. I guess.
They just picked 5 random things that happened in the book and dramatized them to the extreme.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's cool. Anyway, I always find the mass market summary to be rather delightful.
Oh, that's the same summary on the back of mine.
Oh yeah?
That's how I read it. Yeah.
And you even had the classier
This
version.
is the new one.
Weird.
They
They
kept
kept
that.
it.
Wow, they kept
They
it.
couldn't
That
write a
is-
better one.
Yeah. Because nobody could figure out what this book's fucking about.
Here's a mundane character who occasionally has philosophical thoughts, and he gets fired from his job that he probably didn't deserve.
That was the original draft version of the synopsis.
Yeah.
Where they gussied it up a little.
But hold on, let's keep it going here. When the narrator kind of first introduces himself, he talks about happy endings. I think that was the beginning of when you realized that this was a tragedy, not a comedy. Some people, and I'm one of them, hate happy ends. We feel cheated. Harm is the norm. Doom should not jam. Doom should not jam. That sounds like a descriptor of a genre of metal. No, dude. We do Doom. Doom does not jam. We're strictly Doom.
We're jam Doom.
I mean, I would argue that doom metal is sort of jammy in a way, but
Yeah, right?
That's a different podcast.
Anyway, sorry. Okay. Yeah, we feel cheated. Harm is the norm. Doom should not jam. The avalanche stopping in its tracks a few feet above the cowering village behaves not only unnaturally, but unethically.
Remember that passage too. I remember all these passages
Yeah,
because
yeah.
they're fantastic, and I think I like this book. Maybe.
I like sentences in this book a lot. I think. God damn it.
No more
Nick,
pure
are you
statement
fucking
has
changing
ever
my
happened.
mind?
yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I made this comment to Nathan before, but like the fact that I think we all didn't like it that much means I think I decided that I now like it because that's, for some reason I have to have opposing opinions about things, which means that I don't believe anything actually.
I mean, what's really puzzling to me, before I read this, I think I was reading some synopses to do the artwork, and I read that it was, before Lolita, he was famous for this book. Like, this was an immensely popular book, which is very puzzling to me.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't seem to me like it would have mass appeal because of the strange pacing of it.
It is short. The masses like short things. It's consumable.
It is.
It's certainly not as surreal as Beheading or complex as Pale Fire or possibly perverse as Lolita.
Yeah, sure, true, yeah.
Yeah.
Huh.
If you're going to market
It's
something
pretty
to the masses.
straightforward.
Yeah.
But were people like clamoring to love a Nabokov novel or something? I mean, why wouldn't it just fall through the cracks? I mean, those other books are. I mean, I haven't read Lolita, but I've heard they're great. They're great books on their own. I don't know. This one just didn't really hold together to me. I'm befuddled.
Befuddled. It's a good word.
Like Pnin, our poor albino porcupine.
Okay, so final verdict, I guess, putting this in between or in the group of Nabokov works that we're all super big fans of. Do we recommend reading this to anyone, faculty or otherwise?
I don't. I mean, yeah, if you've read other Nabokov and you want to flesh out your bookshelf, yeah, but I mean, I've enjoyed talking about it more than I thought I would.
It's true.
Yeah.
And there's elements that are interesting, but as a novel, no, I don't think I would recommend it.
I think if sad literary types who work at universities are your bag, then Stoner is probably the novel you want to read. But man, I got to go with Nathan. It would be hard for me to recommend this to someone unless they've already read a lot of other Nabokov, in which case they're probably not asking me whether they should read it. They probably jumped in.
Yeah, that's fair. I think I'm going back to my earlier comment that this feels like a thing that if you read it again, a lot of it's going to jump out. Because the small sections I did read again, I started picking up on stuff, and that was very cool to me. So I'm going to say that there's got to be extra stuff in here that is resonating somewhere with other people. And even though it doesn't read like that contained masterpiece of Lolita or Pale Fire, I think I'm still into it. I didn't start out being into it, but I think there's magic in the rereads. I think he's layering some stuff in here under the disguise of something real simple that I just feel on the edge of, but I'm kind of missing. So based on the fact of my own, I guess, poor readings, we'll go with, I will recommend it to others that if you can read it twice.
Based on my lack of faith in myself
Yes.
and having understood this, but believing
in the general arc of the details and the avuncular nature of the character. Can we get paid $1 for every word? I think there's so much about this that is like a hybrid of everything about Nabokov that I'm into, and this combination doesn't fit for me, but it has all of the good shit in it.
you're like,
And
it
to
must
me,
be
like,
there.
Yeah, like it just has to,
Yeah.
like, you know, like you have like a record by a band that you like, and like
This
it's
is
just the one
exactly
that,
what I was just thinking about.
yeah, like it doesn't work for you,
Yeah.
but like it has like all the same exact sounds.
And you're like, it must be me.
Yeah, you're like, did I do this wrong? Like this doesn't make any sense. And so that's like where I'm at. And so like I feel like as the reader, I'm the problem.
It's kind of how I felt about
I'm not
Glass
doing
Bead
it.
Game.
Yeah.
I was like, I love Hesse, and he loved this, so
So why should you be the one to wrong?
yeah,
him?
how can I question Hesse?
Yeah.
Nonetheless.
So if you're a faulty reader, this one's for you.
Wait, shouldn't it be if you're a faulty reader, wait until you're not? So you could actually get what Nick might think be hiding beneath the surface of this book?
Well, I don't want. If you're a really good reader, I don't want you to show me up. So I have to recommend people
I
on my
see.
same
Okay.
level because I have my own insecurities. Thanks for bringing that up.
Hey, you probably aren't sure if you would like this book, so it's for you.
Thanks for listening. As always, you can find us at booksofsomesubstance.com and on Twitter and Instagram with the handle booksosubstance.
Ooh, I want more of this.